Chapter 3. Divide. Adamer's mind raced with the possibilities that lay before them. Here they were, headed to what would quite possibly be the most dangerous place in all of Cosmea, knowing that they would likely encounter creatures that could destroy their weapons at will. He had faced many a daunting challenge since joining the ranks of the Hand of Fire, but still, this one seemed the most insurmountable of all. The team had been on the move for 2 days since they left the ominous Last Bridge Inn, and each step away put his mind further to ease. It was fortunate that they found their horses still tied to the hitching posts outside, though they were for a good while paralyzed by fear, and took a long time to coax into moving. This was all the stranger given a horse's natural inclination to flee danger. He found himself glancing to the back of the group, where he saw Mireth in her usual place taking up the rear of their convoy. She sat there with her hood perpetually up, looking all around her as if at any moment something might leap from the shadows to attack them. Adamer was intrigued by her, as he was with anyone who differed with him so drastically. He had always lived with a curious and energetic demeanor, and he knew that many found it off-putting. Yet still, it was those that were bothered the most by his personality that he found himself most drawn to. He knew that they likely looked down on him, but he was determined not to let that change him. Indeed, he yearned to share with them the lust for life that he had. Perhaps I should speak with her again, he thought to himself, as tree by tree passed them by on their journey. No, it is still too soon. Give her time and perhaps she'll come around. He nodded to no one. Yes, I will get through those stone walls. And in the meantime, he eyed the group around him. There are still several more interesting people for me to get to know. A smile grew wide on his lips as he considered the fascinating stories he was likely to hear from such a diverse group. They continued on in mostly unbroken silence, until at last the sun began to dip over the horizon. In relief, Adamer dismounted his horse and began to unpack the necessary amenities for the night. As had become the custom on the few nights they had been on the road so far, Rakan and Dervish stepped into the woods to begin finding wood to light a fire. After they had finished setting up camp, which took less time with every passing night, they gathered around the fire and prepared their rations. Some even held their bread over the fire to toast it. The group remained quiet still. They were not all that familiar with one another, and spent a lot of time lost in thought over the impeding danger. As had also become custom, it was Adamer who broke the silence. "Belethor, was it?" he said, looking at the smartly dressed man seated near him. "Tell me something about yourself. Like, what is your family like? How do royal human courts look? Do you get to see the king often? Why did he send you on a journey like this? Stuff like that." He caught himself speaking yet again at a mile a minute, a habit he had a hard time breaking. "It's Lord Belethor, if you do please, sir," he said with an air of importance. "I will try to answer some of your tirade of questions. It is apt that you ask of my parentage, as it has much to do with my motivation in joining this perilous journey." He paused, looking around to confirm that he had the group's attention. "For you see, my father was not merely a lord, as I find myself today, but he, indeed, was the steward of Tarmanvale of old." Realization registered on the faces of those seated around the campfire listening. "You are Herit's son, then?" inquired Rakan. "Indeed I am," Belethor responded, with a great deal of gravitas. "I am the son of the disgraced steward Herit, who would not cede his throne to the rightful king of Tarmanvale. I am the son of the steward who was banished from the kingdom and stripped of his title." This revelation piqued Adamer's interest. His mind worked on the ramifications. "Perhaps I misunderstand human customs. Would that not mean that you would be banished with your father? How then did you become a lord when the reputation of your father was so negative?" Adamer asked incessantly. "You are correct in your estimation. I was banished with my father. By all rights I was doomed to live a life of obscurity outside of the great kingdom. The king himself decided I did not deserve such a fate. He did not wish to punish someone he saw as an innocent party, and hoped to stem the tide of bad blood that may fester in the hearts and minds of my father's descendants. For this reason, he reached out and offered me a title, and land within the kingdom, once I had come of age. With this, he gave me the opportunity to build a new life for myself." "Well, that must have been difficult," Elysian said, "given the reputation that preceded you." "Indeed it was," Belethor agreed. "But still I did not shy away from the challenge. The king had offered to introduce me as a new member of the kingdom without heritage, hoping that none would connect me with my father, but I refused. You refused? Adamir asked, unable to restrain his curiosity. But why? You could have escaped your father's shadow far easier had you accepted. You are correct, my vexatious friend, but you misunderstand my intentions. I considered his offer, but decided that it was not my goal to escape my father's reputation. I did not wish to create a new legacy for myself. My goals were more redemptive. My aim was to pull up my family's reputation from the mire in which it found itself, to save my family's legacy. Adamir's inquiries continued about the various dealings of a lord in his sphere of influence. The night wore on until the group grew tired of conversation and began to work their way to their respective bedrolls. They had not taken the time to put up shelter. The night was clear and showed no signs of oncoming storm. Adamir lay on his bedding, staring up into the starry night. He needed no sleep due to the gifts of his magi ancestry. Often this made for dull nights when traveling among humans, as he could make little to no sound lest he disturbed their precious sleep. Tonight, though, he had much to ponder, and was convinced that he would have no problem enduring the night. As he lay there thinking, he heard a strange noise, as if something were stirring in the bushes to the side of the road. He sprang to his feet and grasped his bow, peering into the forest with a great deal of concentration. There he saw dark shapes beginning to creep towards their position, the firelight gleaming off of their blades. Before he could shout a warning to the others, he heard a voice cry, "Krizeka!" in a deep guttural voice somewhere in the woods behind him. He spun around quickly to face the voice just as the intruders leapt from the shadows. Adamir crouched down and grabbed a loose arrow from his quiver on the ground and swiftly knocked it to his bow. He turned and released the arrow just in time to catch an encroaching dash point blank in the chest. The creature stood there for a moment, taken aback by the sudden shaft protruding from him, as Adamir released his bow, allowing it to fall to the ground. He rolled back from the dash just as it made a desperate slash at him. As he rolled, Adamir grabbed his sword and lobbed off the dash's sword arm. Unwilling to wait for either mortal wound to bleed the dash dry, he launched himself forward and sliced the attacker's head clean from his shoulders. As his opponent's body fell limp to the ground, he turned back for a moment to survey the camp. Already his magi compatriots were on their feet fighting the oncoming attackers, who seemed to number in the dozens. Lorinar found shelter behind Nolendil, chanting spells of protection to ward off stray arrows or blades in exchange for his guard against attackers. The wizard in Lycian expertly wielded his staff and sword, parrying a dash with little effort. The humans, as well as Dervish, were not so quick to their feet, as they had already passed into sleep when their foes attacked. Mireth, however, had quickly found her footing and began a counterattack, as though she had not yet been sleeping. Adamir turned his attention back just as the other two dash came at him, swords swinging. They were slow, and little challenge to his quick reflexes. He first parried the blade of one of his attackers, twisting it downward so that the tip of his blade clashed with the dirt road beneath them. As he did, Adamir ducked beneath the wild swing of the other dash. Before they could recover, he took a quick offensive. With his vacant hand, he drove his fist into the gut of the dash whose sword he had parried, winding him. This he followed by swinging around and breaking the other dash's jaw with the pommel of his sword, eliciting a frenzied cry of pain. The first dash recovered and attacked with a downward slash of his sword, only to connect with empty air as Adamir moved quickly to the right. He plunged his sword deep into the dash's stomach, between the plates in his deep black armor. Blood seeped around the pommel of Adamir's blade as the creature gawked at him in disbelief as it breathed its last. He pulled his sword clean and let the body fall dead between him and his attacker. His foe showed no attachment to his fallen comrade, stepping over his carcass and taking a clumsy swing at Adamir, who easily parried. The graceful magi feigned to strike at the dash, who raised his shield to defend, only to have Adamir alter the direction of his blow under the shield, cutting a gash into his side. As the dash instinctively moved to protect his new wound, Adamir pressed forward as if to bring his blade down on the scarred creature's neck, only to have his sword caught midair by the blade of another foe, who followed this with a hard kick to the back of Adamir's knee, knocking him into a kneeling position. This attacker was set apart from the others in appearance. Upon his head was an ornate helm, perhaps a symbol of some kind of authority. The face beneath it was fairer than those of his compatriots, with few negligible scars to mar an otherwise quite human face. Adamir had little time to wonder about this new enemy, as the blade of his other foe sank deep into his shoulder, eliciting sharp pain that caused the magi to cry out. He moved to retaliate, but the wound made him slow, and this new dash had no trouble knocking Adamir's sword from his hands. Fear set in as he heard his sword land with a thud on the ground beside him, and the Desh captain raised his sword above his head for a final blow. Suddenly, an arrow flew from the trees and protruded from the forehead of the broken-jawed Desh, who fell dead to the ground. Adamir turned in disbelief just in time to see a slender figure in deep brown leather leap from the trees, loosing an arrow mid-air that shot across the battlefield, slaying a Desh that faced Dervish. Adamir used this distraction to knock the sword from the captain's hand. This he followed by leaping to his feet, putting his momentum behind his fist as it connected with the Desh captain's jaw, knocking him back a few steps. Adrenaline pumping, Adamir ignored the flaring pain in his shoulder as the blade, still embedded within, grated against his muscles as he moved. Determined not to lose momentum, he brought his foot under the captain's legs, knocking him on his back. Adamir stepped over his fallen foe and grabbed his sword from the ground, ready to stab it into his heart and kill him. "Stay your blade!" he heard a familiar voice call behind him. Adamir put his foot on the Desh's chest as he placed his blade across the captain's throat and turned his head to the one who had spoke. To his surprise, the figure he had seen leaping from the trees was none other than the head of the Hand of Fire, Peleus himself. The Magi strode towards Adamir, a crooked smile across his face. We need one alive for answers, and who better than their captain? Mireth wiped the blood from her blade as she quickly surveyed the scene around her. She could see each of her comrades were alive and well, and that all but one of the Desh lay slain on the ground. She made a quick count of the fallen foes, and it seemed that there were about 24 attackers. She was impressed at how quickly their group had managed to dispatch them. I should have expected as much from an elite band of warriors, she thought idly to herself. She then noticed a new Magi that had appeared amidst the confusion of the battle. This Magi stood tall and proud in a deep, dark leather armor and green cloak. The latter bore a red symbol in the shape of a hand, identifying him as a member of the Hand of Fire. His features were sharp, and his eyes a striking silver color. His light brown hair was tied back in decorative braids behind his ears. She walked to where he was standing, sword still in hand, as he lifted the one remaining Desh to his knees. The Magi pressed the edge of his sword against the helpless prisoner's throat, with just enough pressure to draw a thin line of blood. He stared into the Desh's eyes with a look of fierce humorlessness. "I believe it would be in your best interest to tell us who sent you, and for what purpose," the Magi said with unwavering severity. This elicited a chuckle from his captive. "I have no reason to believe you would spare me, Thessa Carver," he said with a sneer. "I made no promise of mercy that you would believe," the Magi said, appearing unaffected by the curse, "but I can promise you untold pain as an answer to your resistance." The camp remained quiet for a moment, and Mireth found herself intimidated by the smooth, unchanging tone with which this newcomer threatened. This unexpected guest, despite his affiliation with other members of their group, made her uneasy, especially the way that he assumed control of the situation before even introducing himself. "My master would kill me for speaking with you." "He will kill you regardless, on the off chance that you had spoken to us." Another pause followed, and Mireth began to worry they would get nothing from the Desh, when he said, "I do not know my master's true name. He keeps his face veiled, and all refer to him simply as the Lord of Malsheth. We were told simply that there was a group of warriors leaving from Evandale to investigate our fortress. We were told to slay them and bring our master their heads." The Desh spoke through clenched teeth, as if speaking were laborious. Suddenly, the Magi's demeanor changed drastically, a smile spreading across his features. "There! Was that so difficult? You have earned your life. I am Peleus, leader of an elite group of warriors known as the Hand of Fire. What's your name?" Shock registered on the Desh's face, and Mireth felt her own jaw fall. This man was the leader of the infamous group? His previous tone was just an act? "What interest do you have in my name?" "We have need of you yet, and though a Desh you may be, it seems rude to merely call you by your race. You must have a name." Mireth was taken aback by this strange Magi's behavior. Never before had she heard anyone speak to a Desh this way. The Desh had always been enemies to the free people of the world, and many were slain casually. No one that she knew had ever attempted to converse with a Desh, or to learn one's name. She was uncertain that Desh had names. "My name is Uruk," the creature growled. "And what need of me could you have? Am I to be some plaything for you to torture?" "Nothing so base, my friend. I apologize, but we need to restrain you, and we have much to talk about. So this must be the end of the conversation for now, Peleus said casually. Uruk opened his mouth to speak just as Peleus brought down the pommel of his sword on his head, knocking him unconscious. Quickly now, someone tie him up. Nolendil went to work on that. And Adamir, have Lornar take that sword out of your shoulder. You really shouldn't have to be told. Would you care to explain yourself? Rakan demanded. You entered the battlefield from the tops of trees and demand that we leave this Desh alive, and then you proceed to interrogate him without so much as introducing yourself? What are you doing here? How did you know that this Desh would have relevant information? I too wish to know what use you have for this creature. Mireth wondered many of the same things. How rude of me! My name is Peleus, and I am the head of... We heard this already, Dervish interrupted. Oh, right. Anyway, I was privy to your journey, as I had been asked to send some of my warriors to join it. I, however, had been chasing down some information in Barnal to the south, when I heard something interesting that I thought may be of use to my old friend Enlysian. You know Enlysian? Adamir inquired. Many of the group shot him an annoyed look at his interruption. Indeed, I traveled with his father before I formed the Hand of Fire. In any case, I made haste to catch up with your group when I thought I heard something in the woods. I climbed into the trees to gain a vantage point, but before I could get a good look at what was there, they attacked your camp. At that moment, I realized they were likely sent to stop you, and that they may have useful information. The rest, no doubt, you saw. What intel did you feel was so important that you had to chase us down? Enlysian asked him. Right, good point, old friend. It seems that one of your scholars in Barnell has been killed, he said with a calm demeanor. Vital information indeed. That is unfortunate, but it may mean that he found something. Perhaps he was killed for the information he had. This man was one of many who searched for evidence of ancient enchantments that may be of use to us. Was there any evidence linking a killer to his untimely death? Enlysian said, hand on his chin. That, my friend, is perhaps the most interesting part. The man's home was badly damaged, the very torn off the hinges. There were marks in the doorway and on the victim's body that are characteristics of wolves, but too large for any known species. At those words, Mireth's heart constricted in her chest, and she felt her extremities go cold and her eyes wide. Again, scenes of carnage flashed before her. Tears began to form in her eyes. No, it cannot be. There were none left. I was sure of it. Certainly you're not saying they were werewolves? Mireth asked, hoping she was wrong. It took a great deal of willpower not to show her terror at the prospect. The group looked at her, likely shocked that she had uncharacteristically spoken up. Nothing of certain can be said, but the evidence would seem to point toward the resurgence of the long inactive creatures. In any case, I deem the matter pressing, and have no choice but to temporarily reassign the members of the Hand of Fire present to accompany Enlysian to Barnal to investigate this event. In order to compensate for the loss of their numbers in this party, I will accompany you to Malsheth once I have visited headquarters to assign a temporary leader in my absence. Mireth took a step toward Peleus, her head held high in a show of confidence. She had to go with them, to see for herself if the werewolves had returned. It was her responsibility to be certain those creatures were dispatched, something she had long thought she had already accomplished. Sir, I will accompany your people and Enlysian on their journey to Barnell. I have slain many werewolves, and so I will be of use to them. Not only that, but I lived many years in the wilds south of Barnell. I know the area well. Peleus eyed her suspiciously. She felt as if he could see into her mind, as if he knew she had ulterior motives for wanting to accompany the Hand of Fire southward. She met his gaze with as much unwavering concentration as she could rally. They need not know her motivations. She was unsure they could be trusted, knowing what amounted to her greatest weakness. I see no reason you could not, although it is entirely up to you, Enlysian said. She turned to face him. Though it does cost the main party another member. Rakan, what is your opinion on the matter? He asked, turning his head to look at the man. As I see it, this is a reconnaissance mission, not a combat mission. Though higher numbers would be safer, if we do our job right, then numbers will not matter. The more pressing issue, in my estimation, is the loss of Enlysian. He was our expert, the one who is to guide us to Malsheth. I fear I may have determined for what purpose we need Uruk. Surely not, Belethor cried out, making himself heard. This Desh creature cannot be trusted to guide us to the fortress. What reason would he have not to betray us and flee? It would be entirely foolish to place our lives in his hand. I see no other course of action as reasonable, Peleus calmly replied. I believe that having no life left to return to, he hasn't the motivation to betray you. Do you know the legends of how our different people came to be? I do, but I fail to see their relevance here. Oh, but they are so very relevant. You see, we were all once one race in the beginning. I do not believe that Desh are evil to their core. I have lived too long to believe that anymore, though I once most certainly did. Besides, this one is clearly a half-breed, created by sorcery to infiltrate human society if necessary. Give him a chance to live as a man and not a beast, and perhaps he will surprise you. Doubtful, the proud lord grumbled, irate at the notion. As I see it, you have two choices. Take a risk and let the Desh be your guide, or waste time waiting around for Elysian's return. Who knows how long that could take? If you are as intelligent as any who were sent on this mission ought to be, then you will do the right thing. I promise you, if that Desh betrays you, his head will leave his shoulders before he can harm a single one of you, at least while I'm around. It's settled then, Elysian declared. Adamir, Lorinar, Nolandil, Mareth, and I will head southward in the morning to Barnell. Rakan, Dervish, and Belethor will head toward the Desh Mountains, with Urug as their guide. Finally, Peleus will head back to the Hand of Fire headquarters before meeting up with them on the way to Malsheth. One problem, Dervish said. How will Bright Eyes here find us in the mountains? The prudent thing to do is hide our tracks, lest we be followed and wake with blades in our throats. Simple, Master Dweller, Elysian said, smirking. I will cast a spell that connects Peleus with one of your party so that he will be able to track you any place you may go. Mireth shuddered at the thought of someone being able to track her wherever she went. She doubted she would ever trust someone that much. The matter settled, each of their party got to work removing the dead Desh from the road, tossing their bodies into the forest. Rakan tied Urug, who remained unconscious, to a nearby tree. Once those things were settled, they returned to their bedrolls to rest for the few hours that remained until sunrise. Mireth remained awake, her heart filled with dread. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below on whether you would head north to Malsheth or south to fight werewolves. Let me know. See you next time.